Our first reading today is from the Old Testament, from Genesis chapter 25, verses 19 to 34, and both readings are taken from the New English Translation. But first, a brief explanation. Isaac and Rebekah have twins, Jacob and Esau. From the beginning, there is conflict between the two brothers. And the reading follows. This is the account of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham became the father of Isaac. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. But the children struggled inside her, and she said, "If it's going to be like this, I'm not so sure I want to be pregnant." So she asked the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from within you. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, there were twins in her womb. The first came out reddish all over, like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. When his brother came out with his hand clutching Esau's heel, they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open fields, but Jacob was an even-tempered man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for fresh game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked some stew, and when Esau came in from the open fields, he was famished. So Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me some of that red stuff. Yes, that red stuff, because I'm starving." That is why he was also called Edom. But Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." "Look," said Esau, "I'm about to die. What use is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear an oath to me now." So Esau swore an oath to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate and drank, and then got up and went out. So Esau despised his birthright. And our second reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 1 to 9 and 18 to 23. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. On that day, after Jesus went out of the house, he sat by the lake, and such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat to sit while the whole crowd stood on the shore. He told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil. They sprang up quickly because the soil was not deep. But when the sun came up, they were scorched, and because they did not have sufficient root, they withered. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and they grew up and choked them. But other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100 times as much, some 60, and some 30. The one who has ears had better listen. So listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed sown on the rocky ground is the person who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. But he has no root in himself and does not endure. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, immediately he falls away. The seed sown among thorns is the person who hears the word, but worldly cares and the seductiveness of wealth choke the word, so it produces nothing. But as for the seed sown on good soil, this is the person who hears the word and understands. He bears fruit, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. In this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. If you've got ears, use them. Well, that's the text for today. If you've got ears, use them. I'd like to tell you a story. As some of you know, I was the chaplain to Westminster School for 19 years. And in that time, changes took place which are very much in my memory and in my heart. The first was I went to the school as a Methodist boys' school. In that first year, the Uniting Church was born and we became a Uniting Church school. The next year, the boys' school became co-ed. So those beginnings are very, very important in my memory. But this memory is one that I want to share with you. After the time was to move on, a farewell was prepared for Judith and I, and the deputy, who was our next door neighbour, was to speak. Now I must say that when we went to the school, the chaplain's residence was right next to an empty block, and they built a house for the then Director of Studies. He was to live in this brand new house, and it was a man called Brian Simons. Later he became the deputy, and so he lived next door to us for 13 years. So at our farewell, he got up and he said, "You know, I've listened to the chaplain over these years preaching his sermons, but unfortunately 98% of what you hear goes off into the ether, and the other 2% is either misheard or forgotten." He said, "Now I've forgotten most, but there is one sermon I remember." He said he preached on the topic, "Who is my neighbour?" And I thought, after 13 years, he still doesn't know who I am. The Alzheimer's has got him. If you've got ears, use them. Franklin D. Roosevelt was tired of people not actually listening when they were greeting him in a line at the White House. So he thought he would try a little experiment. He whispered as the line came by, "I murdered my grandmother this morning." And the responses were, "Well done, sir." "God bless you, sir." "Keep up the good work, sir." Until the delegate from Bolivia, the last one in the line, actually heard what he said. "I murdered my grandmother this morning. I dare say she deserved it." If you've got ears, use them. Well, Jesus, and I love the translation by John Henson, which the little story on the front of the newsletter today. Jesus was tired and went down and sat on the beach. But a great crowd came down to, again, listen to what he had to say, because he was popular. He was popular with the masses. He was popular with the ordinary folk, the hoi polloi, if you like. And he wanted to deal with that situation, so he got into the boat. And there he told stories and taught them. Now, the boat has become a very important symbol for the early church and the church today. In fact, the cross, if you like, that I'm wearing today is the World Council of Churches symbol. It's a boat on the stormy waters, and the mast and the sail form the cross. And that's been a symbol of the the World Council of Churches. But here is the boat, and the boat is the new pulpit, if you like. Jesus is not welcome very much anymore in the synagogue, but the people want to hear what he has to say. So the story is told. One of the stories is the story of the sower. Now, all three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke, end the story with the words that are something like, if you've got ears, use them, or you better listen to this, or something like that, so that it's heard. It's not read, it's not discussed among themselves, it is something that they hear, and then they have to make something of it. And I just wondered, what was the constitution of that crowd that came out? Why were they there? Were they just curious because they heard Jesus had been a great teacher, great orator, a great storyteller? Or were they also being excluded from the synagogue? This story is repeated by Matthew to a church that has been formed after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and they are scattered and they're not welcome in the places that they used to worship God. So here is a new movement and a story is told. Now, why is this story told? Is it a story about the sower or about the seed? We could spend some time, I guess, discussing it. But let's say it's really a story about the sower and the ordinariness of life that was known then. Now, Jesus, you know, when you look through the Gospels, how often does Jesus quote the Scripture to get a point across? Or how often does Jesus use nature to expand the understanding of God and the relationship with people and the world? But he was no longer welcome in the synagogue where they did look at the Scripture, and these bleak-eyed officers of the synagogue would find ways to try and trap Jesus. You know, there are plenty of stories there about how they sought out ways to trap Jesus, to trip him up. But Jesus was there telling this story to make a very important point. And what was it? Well, I should invite you to engage now, but let me put this point, and if you wish to discuss it with me later, that's fine. That this indiscriminate sowing of the seed was quite paradoxical. It was wasteful. We don't like waste. We like to recycle. We just don't like waste. But here was a farmer who was absolutely extravagant in the wastefulness of the seed that was thrown anywhere, indiscriminately. The end of the story says that there was a harvest and there was joy about what was produced. Some a great production, some a bit smaller, some a bit smaller again. But there was a result. And that's the inevitability when you sow the seeds, that something will happen. And here was a group of his friends. In the little video, you know, they said, we don't understand this. When Jesus sometimes told a story, he said, now do you get it? They said, oh yes. But later on their behaviour showed that they hadn't really got it at all. A bit like us, really. We don't always get it. But here was a story of encouragement. Here was a story to say, I am not giving up on you, even if you give up on yourselves. Here is a story that's saying, you matter, and my mission matters so much, I'm entrusting you with it. In a moment or two, we're going to sing a song from, I guess, from the 60s. They'll know we are Christians by our love. I actually remember this very fondly from a chance that I had way back in the 70s of leading a group to a mission station in Perth called Magumba. And I was asked by the Reverend David Pill, who was in the Young People's Department office at the time, to lead this work party. And we had worship in the little chapel at Magumba, and this is one of the songs that we had. They'll know we are Christians by our love. We will walk together, we will work together, and they will know we are Christians by our love. To me, that was the seed that was being scattered. That was why Jesus, as Matthew reports, said, if you've got ears, use them. Hear this word so that you may live as those who know the love of God, and they will know we are Christians by our love.